Sorry if I get too personal, but in that moment when you discover hip hop, start playing hip hop, and what about the surroundings that you came from? There was any problem? There was any finger pointing about what you were doing, and how you manage that? How you deal with that in a place or people that could be no, that music is the devil's music, as you said, and in a moment that there was no internet, no social media, no nothing, and it was all about what you think, and that's it.
That's a great question. And you're right. There was definitely a lot of finger pointing because at the time, I became a super heavy born again Christian. I grew up in that, and, I want to live this clean lifestyle. But it was just like, man, I was really frustrated because I felt like it was something really special with hip hop music. And although the hip hop at the time was very controversial, I'm talking like NWA and a lot of those guys, what they talked about, it wasn't, I couldn't play that in front of my parents. I wouldn't even want them to know that I was listening to that stuff because it was, they had a lot of profanity. Some things were degrading, but for some reason I was able to tune out the lyrics, and I gravitated towards the production, and then eventually I became a composer and I started producing myself. But I just tried to find a way to appreciate hip hop from the production side of things. And it was definitely some finger pointing and just a lot of judgmental things with myself. I was like, man, I don't want to, stop listening to hip hop because I like this is a part of my culture, and it's something about the beat. I like the loops and it's just something that was hip about it. So I had to figure out. I had to figure my own ways to just appreciate it. And then it really forced me to start producing and making my own hip hop tracks. And basically what I would do is, I started off with a drum machine, and I remember my mom putting me in organ reading lessons because she wanted me to, learn how to play organ. And I remember going to the lesson and my organ lesson teacher, he had this machine that made beats, and I'm like, yo, what's that? Because we were basically playing, we were learning scales, and we needed like a metronome or something, to keep us in time. And he brought that drum machine, and I begged my mom to give me one of those. So that's how I learned. That's my beginnings of composing. I started off on a drum machine, and then I remember getting a Roland R5, which was it was like a popular drum machine at the time, and it had the Roland R5 and Roland R8. And I was so good at sequencing drums where I would get hired to play drum machine drums behind choirs. Like I would make my little money, and I would play, like I'm playing drums on the drum machine, and eventually, and one of my older mentors, let me back up. I remember one of my friends gifted me one of the Casio. It was this Casio keyboard that had 4 sample pads, yellow sample pads on it, and I was just like, man, what is this? You can actually record and make sound. You can say something, and this pad will repeat what you're saying. So I eventually, just to make a long story short, I started making cassette beat tapes, syncing up the drum machine, making patterns on there, and pressing start on this Casio sampler, and I would make beats and put them on cassette. And then I was like, since my mom and my dad, they were both choir directors and they music directors. So my mom collected a lot of vinyl albums, which were all gospel. So I was like, man, at that time, a lot of the hip hop producers, they were sampling, James Brown, Funkadelics, Bernard Purdy, they were sampling secular, records. And I was like, well, if I want to continue to listen to hip hop and be on this born again Christian market, journey, I started sampling gospel music. So I would take my mom's, vinyl records and cassettes, and I would make gospel beat tapes. So that was my thing. And as when we start doing something, we want to be like the people that have influenced us. And at that time, I loved producer DJ Premier. He had a group called Gangstar, Pete Rock, was a big producer, and it's crazy that I'm actually in Pete Rock's live band, and Dr. Dre, the RZA from Wu-Tang Clan, Q-Tip, man, the Bomb Squad, the list goes on. So I was making beats, trying to make beats like, with that same aggression, but instead of using secular music, I was sampling gospel. So I still got my cassette tapes, with those beat tapes. So that was my thing. And then eventually I knew that I was gonna have to get my own style, when as you grow up, when you're young, you want to do everything that your heroes do. If they playing a certain stick, you want to play that same stick. But I remember, and I'm kind of getting long-winded, I don't want to keep going. I know you got other questions, but yeah, I just started making gospel beat tapes, and then eventually, I started making these projects. One of the projects and artists that I was working with was my sister. We would just make these, hip hop styles, soul hop. That's what I call soul hop. This combination of hip hop and soul together. But we would make these like hardcore hip hop tracks with her vocals on it, and I had other artists like my cousin and different ones that I was like, I had this vision of making these, gospel hip hop, projects. I only went so far, but I still have the same. What's the word I'm looking for? Oh man.
It's kind of your own direction, the way you want to things to be made, and I just as a fan of music, mm-hmm. I think you should release those tracks with those beats with gospel music. I think the world need it. I think the world needs to hear that. I can even imagine that's how awesome is, and I hope someday you have your own label. Don't quote on me, but you mm-hmm. should release those tracks. And you were talking about everything that the artist do to make it in their own way, just to thrive. And in what moment, because the artist makes his music, its own music in your own room, in your garage, just show it to your closest friends. When you realize that your music or what you are creating is professional, it needs to take the next step to be with new musicians, to be in a band, to release music, to take it to the next level as a professional, as a musician who wants a career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to answer the question, but just to piggyback, I did eventually get some better equipment, and I had my older mentor. They all had studios, so he would show me how to use the S900, a Kai sampler, and just to fast forward, make a long story short. I did take a lot of those beat tapes, and I was able to clean them up in the studio. And nowadays, even within almost the last decade, moving from those equipment pieces to now you being able to produce everything with a computer, I have released a lot of those projects, instrumentals, on my Bandcamp page. So if you go to my Bandcamp and my SoundCloud, there's Spirit Drums Part 1 through 4. There's Loopers projects, and there's a lot of those projects that have a lot of those gospel samples. So I was able to do that and put it out in the world. And all of the Daru Arena projects, we do have that undertone, positivity, spiritual undertone. Not being a gimmick or saying, judging people or nothing like that. But the energy of what we make is it's all about edifying the community and putting out positive vibes. And that's that's something that I wanted, that I do, that I bring in any genre that I play in, regardless if whatever they're talking about, just on the energy, spiritual level. That's what I want people to feel, and I think it transitions when I'm on stage and off stage. But I remember